Hi and welcome to the latest episode where today we're joined by Sam Watson, the CEO of Bioxyne. Sam co-founded Breathe Life Sciences in 2018 and built into Australia's leading manufacturer of novel medicines, MDMA, Psilocybin and cannabis, before engineering its acquisition by ASX listed Bioxyne in 2023. At the age of just 29, he became the youngest CEO of an ASX company that I could find. The business is now profitable, growing at nearly 150% revenue year on year, and importantly, meaningful EBITDA contribution as it expands into UK, Germany and Latin America. Now, this conversation is really about building in a sector most people, including myself, don't understand, and what it actually takes to scale a pharmaceutical manufacturer in a category that didn't exist a decade ago. We hope you enjoy.
So Sam, thanks very much for joining us. First off, before we get into Bioxyne, you founded BLS or Breathe Life Sciences in 2018 before Psilocybin, I got it right the first time, which is good.
Nailed it.
MDMA and cannabis were sort of in vogue or even approved. Take us back to then, your sort of vision and how you sort of it's changed, in the 6 or 7 years since to today.
So I started following the medicinal cannabis industry when I was living in New York. This was, towards the end of my university years. So I saw the first wave of medicinal cannabis companies, mainly cultivators, going public in the US, Canada, huge amounts of capital, flooding into the industry. So I already had an interest at that point in time. Moved back to the UK, thought, it would be great to, build a business in this space. I see tremendous potential in the therapeutic benefits. There's a global opioid crisis, and the opportunity to build something, and it took several years to get to the point where we had anything medical, but the initial entry point was actually through our Dr. Watson brand, which was a consumer health products brand in the UK. Then expanded that into Japan, and eventually around 2021 entered the Australian market when the regulations started to change.
And maybe just talk us about the regulation in terms of the environment that you operated in for those few years. You talk about it took a few years, but what did that actually look like? And I'm assuming the rest of that now is certainly a competitive advantage in terms of being approved and advanced in that field.
Yeah, so around 2018, I first set the business up.
Yep.
Regulations were starting to change in the UK, in Australia initially, with medical options becoming available, rescheduling it so that doctors could prescribe it. At that point in time, it became a Schedule 8 medicine in Australia. So the scheduling is essentially, Schedule 9 is high risk research only typically. Schedule 8 is there is some therapeutic benefit. Doctors can prescribe it in certain circumstances, like where there's a special need, an unmet clinical need. So that was the initial regulatory framework. And then I suppose patient demand, people either using it recreationally, self-medicating, pushed the industry to a more formal stance on, okay, well, this is actually a medicine and an alternative option that needs to be further explored. And there is a significant patient demand in Australia, in the UK, in Germany, our key markets, for the products.
And then if we look at Bioxyne, obviously the listed company acquired your company in 2023. Just talk us through, first of all, Bioxyne. I think they do prebiotics or probiotics, and just talk to, is there any sort of synergies there, or what sort of entry point did that allow into Australia?
So we'd entered the Australian market prior to initiating conversations with the Bioxyne board at the time. Bioxyne's been listed since December 2000, and I was still tying my shoelaces, learning to tie my shoelaces at that point. This probiotics business is still around today.
Yep.
It's a small part of our business, sub $1 million a year. It's pretty hands off. It is synergistic in that, it's a consumer health product. It fits within the portfolio. It's also interesting for us because it's an entry point to the US market. So the main client for the probiotic products is a US based distributor. But in terms of our core operations, the business as it is today, it's very much manufacturing medicines, finished medicines for patients, and focusing on those three product categories: psilocybin, MDMA, medicinal cannabis.
And just in terms of, you talk about those three, and particularly in medicinal cannabis, a lot of people think about it and think about cultivating. Can you just talk us about where you sit in the supply chain and how that works?
So we sit kind of in the middle of the industry. So if you imagine it as, on one end you have cultivation, farmers growing the raw material, which isn't a GMP process, it's a GACP, good agricultural collection practices process. Now post-harvest, and this is just for one of the many types of cannabis variants, the active pharmaceutical ingredients that we take on to their manufacture, we aggregate that product and turn it into finished patient-ready medicines. So a wide range of products from typical flower, inhalable, vaporizable flower products to pastilles, gummies.
Yep.
We were the first company in Australia to bring pastille manufacturing here. Before we did so, pastilles were less than 1% of prescriptions. They're now around 20% of cannabis prescriptions. So it's a category that we've been instrumental in building in Australia. Liquid dose forms, oral mucosal oils and vaporable liquids.
Yep.
And then hard format capsules, tablets, and so on. Yeah.
And then just in terms of GMP certification, it's sort of central in everything that you do. For listeners who are sort of unfamiliar with that, can you just talk through the process of being approved and how much of a differentiator that is within the market?
It's a very long and difficult process. The standard operating procedures, the documentation, the quality system behind what we do is a significant barrier to entry for people trying to come into this market. But maintaining that system and maintaining it and growing it to get to a certain scale is a significant challenge. And I think we've done that better than probably any other manufacturer in our industry, probably in the world. And I think that's starting to show through in the results. But it certainly shows through in our ability to win business, to be able to service our clients who are clinics, pharmacies, ultimately prescribers and patients who are receiving the medicines.
And it's somewhat rare, particularly on the ASX, in this space to have a profitable and strong growing EBITDA positive at a rate of knots company. Can you just talk us through the unit economics and maybe just a bit of a breakdown in terms of where the growth is coming from, particularly on the EBITDA line?
I think it's a bit of a shame that cannabis companies, we're not just a cannabis company, of course, but generally the cannabis market, I suppose it's been burned in the past. Investors, the market has been burned by companies who have invested significantly into asset-heavy business models, overspecced, overbuilt, haven't been able to deliver a return or profit. What we see, and we have 130 odd clients in the Australian market, most of those companies, they're private, most of them are making money, making profits, right? As are we, of course, but as a business, for us, we've been able to scale through the cash flows from our operations, and that's been a critical point of difference, I suppose, comparing us to the other companies in our sector who are listed. But it's a fundamental sort of vision of the business. We've always envisioned ourselves operating profitably, growing profitably, reinvesting that capital to improve scale, efficiencies, cost, and ultimately being able to compete on a global scale with the large international manufacturers.
You talk about 130 Australian clients. What are they sort of made up? Is that clinics or what does that look like?
Yeah, clinics, wholesalers, pharmacies. As a manufacturer, we represent probably 300 plus brands for medicinal cannabis products in Australia. The MDMA and psilocybin products aren't typically branded, and they're mainly going to clinics doing authorized prescriber access schemes, as well as clinical trials. But in terms of sort of the number of units for manufacturing per year, 2 years ago it was 0. Now we're manufacturing close to 3 million plus finished product units just for the Australian market.
It's a lot.
It's big growth.
Yeah,
it's a lot of products.
And maybe if we just sort of step back, talk about psilocybin, talk about MDMA. I think everyone's sort of across medicinal cannabis and it's had a fair bit of education within the Australian market. Maybe just talk to us about this sort of science, sort of clinical trial side of psilocybin and MDMA and the sort of impacts around PTSD and whatnot.
This for me is one of the most exciting parts of our business. As a company, we're focused on manufacturing medicines for unmet needs, right? So patients, and in some cases, it's a significant percentage of patients for certain indications, don't respond to existing treatment options. So for patients with depression, typically up to a third of those patients are treatment resistant. So the existing options aren't working for them. So that creates a need for alternatives, for potential other medicines that historically and until very recently they would not have been able to access. So psilocybin, for example, the Australian regulators have now rescheduled it. So as a finished product, it's a Schedule 8, and psychiatrists can prescribe it for treatment-resistant depression. Fantastic. It's a new alternative. It's a potential hope for patients suffering to regain normalcy in their lives, get back to their normal lives. And MDMA is more for PTSD.
Yep.
Now look, it's a smaller part of our business today, but we're investing in it to realize the long-term potential of how big these markets can be.
Do you sort of see it as being able to offer multiple, whether it's psilocybin, MDMA, medicinal cannabis, the right term is probably not one-stop shop, but just being able to offer, when you talk about unmet need of patients, that full spectrum, that it's not just specialising in one sort of space. How do you sort of look at that?
As a business, look, I suppose you could consider us somewhat akin to a biotech company, but the commercial model's reversed. So we're commercializing the investigational medicines before doing trials. We're taking them to market, commercializing them, turning them to revenue, profit, before having to go and invest in these massively heavy, long trials.
So you guarantee.
Exactly. And I suppose we're sort of de-risking the opportunity in doing that. I think the opportunity going forward is to expand the product portfolio, to look for new investigational medicines that we can monetize, commercialize before eventually going through the registration pathway. I mean, ultimately, the long-term opportunity would be for this business to be supplying public healthcare systems, to put these medicines on PBS, on NHS in the UK, for governments to be the client.
And in terms of that, it just seems, you're a rather small company at the moment, still growing extremely fast and young in nature. But when you talk about UK and being one of the key providers to it, why can't others do this?
Well, they can and they do.
Yep.
But do they do it as well?
Yep.
Do they do it at scale like we do? When we received our manufacturing license, which is actually almost 2 years ago today, back in February 2024, it was at the time the largest license in terms of scope, product scope, and it was also the first license for psilocybin and MDMA products in Australia. And it's actually one of the only licenses in the world for GMP, pharmaceutical-grade psilocybin MDMA capsules. In terms of why can't other people do it, many of our clients, for example, in Australia, did have certain product lines licensed under GMP to manufacture their own products. What we have seen is most of those clients have shut down that side of their business to put the work with us because of the complexities and the costs in managing it. If you don't get it right, it's very hard to manage. Yeah. And if you don't do it compliantly, it's a problem.
And it's just, I suppose, a reputation thing as well that once you trip up, you're probably not going to get another.
Once you trip up, it's very hard to rectify. Yeah. And once you lose the license, it's game over. But I mean, so for us, it's very important that we specialize and focus very much on what we're doing and doing it as well as we possibly can.
And in terms of first half, just came out recently, growth, I think it was up sort of 150%, which is pretty powerful. First of all, what were the key drivers of the growth?
We're in a growing market. We're in a significant growing market, both in Australia, but also expanding internationally, which is something very few companies have done successfully. So we're one of the few Australian pharmaceutical manufacturers, particularly for cannabis, that have been able to scale up and expand into Germany, into the UK, and maintain and operate that business while still scaling our Australian operations. We see tremendous growth potential in both the Australian market, but the export-led markets are going to significantly contribute to that going forward.
And in terms of customer numbers, I think, again, that grew over 100%. Is that more a case of, you talked about the market is growing really strongly. Is that more a case of, the market pulling you through, or sort of sales and distribution, pushing that way?
It's a little bit of both. So I suppose we've become in Australia the kind of go-to manufacturer for these medicines. We're a natural choice. We deliver. We've got great service levels. We can do it faster than our competitors. There aren't that many competitors doing what we do, but the ones that are, we deliver faster, we're more consistent, and we do have that scale. So if we have a huge influx of purchase orders in a given month, we can meet that demand.
Because you increase the production facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of the secret sauce, I suppose, in what we're doing. We can scale up very quickly, and it's reasonably capital light, right? So we don't need to invest a huge amount of money to double our capacity, double our clean room space. It's more people, but we can get it done fast and scale up pretty fast.
And in terms of the relationships and customers, how does that sort of look? You talked about clinics, you talked about and whatnot. Yeah, are they sticky? What's the sort of duration? Have you had much turnover or churn that they've gone to other competitors? How does that sort of look?
Starting with the patients in this industry are very sticky.
Yeah.
I mean, typically patients are receiving a prescription every month. So a repeat prescription being filled every single month. And we see, in Australia, there's probably 1.7 million roughly patients that have received medicinal cannabis over the last several years. But the regular, I guess, core patient base is probably in the sort of 300,000 patients. And that's, they're probably receiving scripts and medicines every 4 to 8 weeks. So the average spend, we estimate it in Australia being around $4,000 per year for those patients. So they spend a lot. It's self-pay as well.
And in terms of rebates, and is there anything on that just yet, or is that still to come, an upside there?
Still to come.
Yeah.
In the veteran space, there is. So the Veteran Association, it's the DVA, isn't it?
Yeah.
They offer a rebate for certain patients that access in a certain way, and that's a market we supply into as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the bulk of it, and the same for overseas, it's mostly self-pay.
And if you're more the numbers guy as well, from what I understand in terms of the finance background, but with regards to, I think you upgraded EBITDA guidance, was it 16.5 to 19?
Yep.
Hope I didn't get that wrong. Market caps, 140, 150?
I think it's a little bit less, 135, I think.
So it's obviously trading under 10 times EBITDA. What is it sort of, I haven't looked at peers, overseas. I don't think there's probably any here. How does that sort of look? And particularly given you don't have to comment on it, but
I love that
growing
question.
very fast.
Yeah.
How does that sort of look?
So there's one recent deal. So if you look across to Germany and the international market, so British American Tobacco have invested in a company called Organigram, US listed. Organigram have just acquired a big German distribution business called Sanity. Sanity, I think the deal was closed at 130 million euros with an uplift to 250.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that's based on 40 times EBITDA.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. 1.7. Can you say shit on a podcast?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
We can do whatever we want.
Brilliant. So 1.7 times revenue and around 40 times EBITDA. So,
it's
do the math.
And in terms of the margin of the business, why is it's pretty strong.
It's pretty strong and it's growing.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's also growing in a market where there is price compression. You look at companies in the clinic end of the market and the distribution end of the market, the listed ones who are reporting on these numbers, they see price compression. And Australia is the most competitive market in the world when it comes to medicinal cannabis, at least. Pricing's low, but we've been able to maintain and even improve our bottom line. And I think that just goes to show the efficiency in the business. As we scale, we'll continue improving that profitability. A lot of what we've done over the last 6 months is investing in the procurement side, so aggregating supply, not just being a contract manufacturer, but actually doing the full procurement and product manufacturing service.
And I was listening to something that was a few years ago when you vended it in. I think the valuation was around 50, 55 or something similar.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And what were you doing then in terms of revenue and EBITDA?
Aggregated across
probably not much.
The probiotics business and BLS at the time, I think we were probably doing 5 or 6.
Yeah. So I just always find it amazing in terms of you sort of gone 3x, but I think it was 3,000% growth. It's very, very strong.
That was part of the appeal originally to go public. Wow, strong valuation multiples. You can,
and then just sit in the ether for a little bit until you're certainly relevant from A being EBITDA positive and B market cap getting to that sort of 150 plus. Makes it more institutional grade. In terms of you talked about Germany, you've talked about the international markets. How do you scale? I know you're based in London. I know you're coming out here every second month, and it's exhausting. How do you sort of balance scaling fast without sort of losing operational control as well? Being in so many markets.
I'm raking up the air miles, a lot of air miles. But look, what I can say about the business, and this is not something anyone can see from the outside unless you come and, if you visit the site, and this is the feedback we get constantly, we have an amazing team. The culture, the ethos, the drive, you can feel it when you're there.
How many in the team?
In Australia, I'm not sure if Jason probably wants me to disclose this, but close to 100 people.
Yeah, okay, wow.
In Australia.
Because that's grown a lot, right?
We was, I think, 60 years ago.
I think it was like 8, when the podcast I listened to.
Yeah.
That's
it's grown a lot.
And so you haven't blown out the cost base as well in terms of on the top line. You obviously matched that, which is really good.
Well, the fixed costs as a percentage of revenue have not increased anywhere near the top line growth. Yeah.
The GMP facility I think it's in Scotland. Just talk us through that. I think you're getting funding through one of the groups there. Why is that sort of strategic and a move worth pursuing?
It's not GMP yet, but hopefully by December this year.
Definitely want to disclaim that.
Maybe before then,
Yeah.
As a business, right, so we need to be close to our clients.
Yeah.
Quick timelines, quick turnaround, quick delivery times is essential for this market. To be able to service our clients appropriately, we need to be in the jurisdiction that we're supplying. So it's also a regulatory play. Our moat is built around the systems, the SOPs, standard operating procedures, our quality system, but ultimately the licenses, right? What we're licensed to do, because these are all controlled drugs. So that's very important. But having those in each jurisdiction, each key market is definitely part of the strategy, and it's necessary to secure the future and the longevity of the business. So what we're doing in the UK, and bear in mind the origins of the business are in the UK and Europe, we've built a captive audience, a captive client base who we are already supplying ex-Australia, so exporting from Australia to these clients. We wanted to build the sales and distribution channel before setting up and building the manufacturing asset. It's a long process, and it's a lot of time and human capital as well as financial capital being invested to set that up. But we wanted to make sure once it's up and running, it's running at 100 miles an hour, and we've got the client base, and we're picking up even more business.
Very good. So you listed 23. You weren't. I think there's some bandied around the office around being one of the youngest ASX CEOs at the time, which some people can see as negative, some people see as a positive in terms of energetic, youthful, and passionate. How do you think you've sort of grown over the last 3 years in terms of obviously being an ASX CEO? Do you think you were? And I'm not saying that you were, but do you think you were naive going into it, and you've sort of had your eyes opened? The market's pretty ruthless, and it can be a hard slog at times. How do you look at that?
The first 12 months were tough.
Yeah.
I think I saw the shiny, bright toy.
This is going to be easy.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah, look at this.
Yeah.
Some hard lessons.
Yep.
Definitely. A very steep learning curve.
What were the hard lessons?
We had we signed up one of our first big contracts with an Australian client, and we didn't want to announce the name. They didn't want us to announce their name.
ASX.
The ASX pulled us up, said you need to announce the name. And at the time, it was like 150% of our annualized revenue in one deal. So fair enough.
Yeah.
They wanted to scrutinize it, and I kind of said, okay, well, no, we're not going to do it. Let's just hold back a bit, get some advice.
Suspension.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah. 2 days. So learned my lesson on that. ASX says jump, I say how high.
Yeah, 100%.
Also, just I suppose I'm reasonably shy. I'm not super. I haven't had a strong sort of history in presenting and public facing. I never saw myself being CEO of a public company. Actually, before going public, I was actually looking for another CEO.
Are you glad you didn't do that now?
Pretty glad. Yeah. Pretty happy. It was hard to find the right person who I saw having the right vision, the right sort of culture, building the right culture in a business. Ran out of time. Had to be me, and this is what we've got.
And in terms of you had someone who when you started BLS in 2018, in terms of the regulatory side and whatnot, what would you have wished they told you back then that you now know?
I had actually people telling me back then, why are you doing that business? It's never going to go anywhere. People close to me as well. Like, you should do something else. Go into property or something. Go into
something normal.
something normal.
Yeah.
And I was, I guess, stupid enough not to listen to them. Lucky enough not to listen to them.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe a question without notice. What sort of drives you harder? Is it meeting patients' unmet needs as we've sort of discussed, or is it winning as a business?
Bit of both. I think
that was the correct answer.
It's definitely a bit of both, but it's I think part of it's breaking into new frontiers. It's changing the old system and trying to push forward with something new, something innovative,
challenging. Yeah,
and something that it's amazing that we are actually delivering a lot of human value. We're helping people, and I can see that on a personal level. Family members or friends of friends or patients that I know who are on.
I hear it all the time, right? In terms of the challenges and troubles across a whole spectrum of illnesses and challenges. I look at it that if you're treating a whole bunch of patients who need this, the business wins and ultimately shareholders do as well, which you're the largest shareholder. So you've got a vested interest.
I do indeed.
Well done on the journey today. And we look forward to following closely.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.